Good morning, afternoon, wherever you are. It's just noon here, so I can go either way. So, welcome to our live today. I'm really excited to have probably my best friend, actually, other than you, Teresa Carpenter, on with me today with her little girl, Lucy. And Lucy sort of started this whole story, didn't she?
Hmm.
uh,
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Mm.
So, what we want to talk about today is mothball poisoning in not only dogs but pets and people. And um, we were talking about this at our office meeting the other day, and the younger people in the office meeting said, "What is a mothball? I have never heard of mothballs." So, first of all, I was surprised that this is a generational thing because it's something. So Teresa and I are going to show our age, but it's something that we grew up exactly knowing what it was
Hmm.
and knowing that smell. So it was sort of like you would go to grandma's house or go out to dinner with grandma, and grandma always had either the smell of cedar from having a cedar closet or the smell of mothballs, because that's where you stored your sweaters and your clothing in an area with mothballs. So mothballs are pesticides, and they slowly release a vapor to kill and repel moths, their larvae, and other insects from stored clothing and fabric. So there's a picture of some. Um, and the interesting thing is that we don't need them as much anymore because most of our clothing is made out of synthetic fibers now. But back when we were growing up, everything was wool or cotton and natural fibers. And so if you got moths in your closet, then all of a sudden they would eat holes in your favorite sweaters and your clothing. So that's something we just knew about growing up. Because I know, like, my parents always did, and yours probably did this too, Teresa. They would change the clothes out of the closet and the dressers winter and summer. And so all the summer clothes would go into boxes in the attic or the
Right.
basement or storage closet, wherever, but they were in cardboard boxes. We didn't have these big plastic totes. Things weren't well sealed. They were in garment bags, or they were in cardboard boxes, or they were just on shelves in the attic. And then you repeat that process and change everything out for the next season. And same with blankets. Like, did your mom change out
Hmm.
all the blankets and everything every season? Yeah. So
Oh,
you go
yeah.
from the
Yep.
heavy blankets to the lighter
Summer
summer.
weight. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So, and when those would go into storage in order to keep moths and silverfish and other insects from getting into your clothing or your blankets, you would put mothballs in there. So sometimes they're used to repel snakes and mice and other animals. That's not what they're meant for, and they don't actually work for that. Um, and they come in a variety of forms. So we showed a picture of the balls, but they also come in cubes, spheres, cakes, scales, powder, and flakes. And they can contain a couple of different chemicals. So the older ones use naphthalene. It's a very, very intense smell that once you smell it, you kind of can't not smell it. Um, Paradichlorobenzene is somewhat newer, and then the newest ones are camphor, which is an essential oil that's not quite as toxic. But the ones that are labeled old-fashioned mothballs, those are going to be naphthalene. So I'm going to have Teresa tell the story. This goes back about a week and a half ago. I was working diligently in my office and my phone rang. And it's really rare that I answer my phone when it rings because I never know who's going to be on the other end. But it came up as Teresa Carpenter, and she doesn't usually call me. She usually texts. So I jumped on it right away. So, Teresa, this is where you get to tell Lucy's story of why you were calling me kind of in a panic.
Yeah. So, Memorial Day weekend, my husband and I traveled up to New Jersey to visit my mom and dad. They are both 86 years old. They are still living independently in their little home near Atlantic City. And we brought all three of our dogs with us on this trip. Typically, we don't. But we decided to do that this time. And the guest room, when we got there, had a terrible, strong odor of mothballs. I mean, I knew what they were because, like Judy said, we grew up with them. And so, my parents being older, they keep the house pretty much shut up because they're always very cold, even though it was warm outside. So there was no ventilation. Um, we came in, we unpacked, and my husband found a loose mothball on the floor near the dresser. He went, "Oh, that's not good." So he went and he picked it up. Then he started looking under the bed and found them under the bed. The thing that concerned me was that, our dogs, when they come into the house, they start running around the house, and they immediately went into the guest room because they know that that's where we stay. And so I immediately was jumping to conclusions that somebody found a mothball, one of the three of them, and ate it. But I asked my mom, I said, "What's the deal with the mothballs?" And of course, it being summertime, all of the winter bedding, all of the winter blankets came off of the bed in the guest room. She folded them up. She didn't bag them, unfortunately, but took a handful of mothballs and threw them into the bottom of the closet.
Oh,
The smell was so bad that we had the window open and the ceiling fan running at high speed the entire time we were there. Um, I cleaned up all the mothballs and I said, "Mom, you can't have these just loose in the house. You know, dogs can eat them. My brother's dogs come to visit as well. So, she said, "Oh, no, no, go ahead and get rid of them." And that was that. 24 hours later, the next day, I was outside on my parents' front lawn. We had taken Charlie and Lucy for a walk, about a 35-minute walk. And Lucy she was panting pretty heavily. So my husband put her back in the house in front of the fan. And while I'm outside on the front lawn talking to one of my mother's neighbors, Jim's watching Lucy's backside basically just stop working. She was trying to get up with her front paws, but her backside was just totally, she couldn't move. And then he basically watched her from the backside moving to the front of her just freeze. She was frozen. Her eyes were open, but she wasn't really breathing. She was just frozen. So he runs her outside to me. I open up her mouth. Tongue is gray, grayish purple. Gums are gray. And, we were trying to open up her mouth, open up her airway, but, seconds that seemed like minutes were passing. And I wasn't sure if I was doing it right because I'd never experienced a dog having a seizure. So that's when I picked up the phone and I called Judy and I said, "I think Lucy's having a seizure. I don't think she's breathing." Judy walked us through how to hold her, how to get her mouth open, and explained that, she can't swallow her tongue, but, the thickness of the tongue could block the back of the airway and to pull the tongue forward. And so we were working through all of that. And finally, she started to breathe and finally she started to relax. So we put her in front of the fan. I insisted that the air conditioner be turned on in my parents' house. And, within about an hour, she was back to her goofy little self. That was May the 29th that
wasn't there some vomiting involved with that whole
did
episode as
vomit.
well?
Yes, she did. She vomited once the seizure passed, and she started breathing again. She was like, like coughing, choking, like gasping for breath, and then vomited a little bit on the front lawn. So yeah, so there was some vomiting involved there too. Little
Right.
bit. It was clear, like bile, like she didn't pass any food, but mucusy type stuff. So we got home and we went about our merry business. And then this past
Well,
Tuesday
I
evening,
also had you take her in when you got home because it was Memorial Day weekend. Tuesday
right.
morning, I made you go in, and we'll talk about why, but I made you have lab work run on her.
Right. We went in, we explained to our vet what happened. They ran lab work. We were looking for mothball toxicity in her labs. Her labs came back perfectly fine. Everything was in the normal range. I think her ALT was just a little underneath, but Judy said that's fine. And so we just, we kept monitoring her, but a week from that doctor's appointment, that first doctor's appointment, she started coughing, choking. She vomited a little bit again on our bed. This was as we were getting ready to go to bed. And then she started gasping for breath. She could not breathe. She would get in like a quick inhale and then a exhale. And part of Judy's rant recently about ERs and how a lot of emergency rooms aren't staffed was partially our frustration in trying to get a hold of a veterinary service who would see her as an urgent case that night.
On
The
Sunday
one
night,
on a
right?
on a it was a Tuesday night.
Tuesday night.
It was a
Okay.
Tuesday night, and the closest one booked told us to go to Virginia Beach, 33 miles away. And they told us she was not critical enough to be seen and to monitor her. So that started the all night long vigil of making sure that she was fine and comfortable. And the next day, our vet was wonderful and brought us in as a walk in. And we spent literally all day at the vet's office this past Wednesday. Um, and they were wonderful. They ran all kinds of tests on her. They did x-rays, they ran a blood work again, and they discovered the diagnosis for Lucy is an aspiration pneumonia. So and it was pretty bad. Her
Yeah.
entire right lung was just collapsed inward on itself. And so now we are on the journey of trying to get her back to health. She's going to be on two different antibiotics for probably the next 3 weeks, at least.
At least.
So, at least it's a very slow process, we were told. But, we have confidence in our vet. And of course, Judy's, to kind of confirm that. I mean, we were taking pictures of the digital image in the x-ray room and sending them to her. And so and our vet of course was on vacation, so we were working with a vet that we had not yet met in the practice, but it all turned out fine.
It did,
So
and I Teresa would text me and I would say, "Okay, ask him to do this. Okay, do this. Okay, ask about this." And I have to give her vet credit because nothing's worse than having a backseat driver on the other end of the phone telling you what you need to do next. And I kept saying to Teresa, "I really like your vet. Like your vet's doing a great job." so,
yeah.
so that was the good part. All right, so let's talk more. So our belief at this point, like aspiration pneumonia doesn't happen overnight. So it most likely came from when she had the seizure and the little bit of vomit the week before. She aspirated something when she wasn't breathing correctly. And that sat there and festered and basically made an abscess in her lungs. So now we've got this lovely infection. And if all goes well, it's going to clear up. She may have a little scarring in that right middle lung lobe. But that remains to be seen. So, but this all started, we think, from mothball vapors or eating a mothball. So let's talk about them. Mothballs contain a high concentration of insect repellent. Poisoning most commonly occurs when dogs ingest mothballs. Cats are more sensitive to their toxic effects, but they're a little less likely to eat them. The old-fashioned naphthalene mothballs are the most toxic type of mothball because smaller amounts can cause poisoning. Ingestion of naphthalene mothballs can cause GI upset, so vomiting, diarrhea, and less frequently anemia, neurologic signs, kidney, and liver damage, which is why we wanted the lab work run. And for better or for worse, both of Teresa's dogs had just had a dental procedure under anesthesia a couple days before all this started. So, but the good news is we had lab work for comparison. So, if something had come up as being abnormal on that Tuesday when you got it run, then we would have had, great information on, comparing what we had before. So, okay. Why did my computer just die? Okay. Am I not plugged? My screen just went black. There it is.
Oh,
Weird. Okay. So the modern what are these, paradichlorobenzene, PDP, mothballs are less toxic, but they can still cause illness, especially when eaten. Commonly results in GI upset, neurologic signs, and rarely kidney or liver damage. And then mothballs that contain camphor, which is an essential oil, have a low risk of poisoning, but stomach upset is the most common sign. Large ingestions, however, can result in stimulation of the nervous system and possible seizures. As little as one mothball could poison a dog. And so herein was the problem that we didn't know because they were sort of scattered around.
and they were the old-fashioned kind. I forgot to mention, Judy said, go in and look at that box, find out if your mom still has the box. They were the old-fashioned kind.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's see. The toxic dose depends on the size of the pet. Well, Lucy's not very big. She's 16, 18 pounds.
18 pounds, yeah.
There you go. The size of the mothball, the type of the mothball, and whether it was ingested or if they were only exposed to fumes. If you think your dog has eaten a mothball, contact your veterinarian and call the pet poison helpline. I should have had Joey put this up, but it's 800-213-6680. The sooner you seek treatment, the better. Do not induce vomiting or give anything orally unless your veterinarian or pet poison control specifically tells you to. And put the packaging and remaining loose balls into a sealed plastic bag and take them with you for identification. And I actually have a way in here that we'll get to how you can tell whether your mothballs are the old-fashioned kind or the newer kind if you don't have the packaging. So they dissolve slowly when ingested by dogs or cats or people. Poisoning can be delayed for several days. So when Lucy then had this problem a week later, and Teresa was then texting me saying, oh my gosh, and sent me videos of this poor dog struggling to breathe. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're a week later. The latest I could find was like 5 days later. And that was with, kind of large ingestions where people had eaten them, and it took 5 days for symptoms to show up. So we were a little past that. So I was like, hopefully that's not it. But, we just didn't know. So I made her get lab work again. Your vet probably loves you.
Yeah.
All right. So signs of poisoning: vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain, mothball scented breath, pale or brown gums, because it can cause a hemolytic anemia and bind the hemoglobin in the red blood cells. Weakness or lethargy, labored or rapid breathing. So, of course, we're reading all this and going, oh my gosh, poor Lucy. Walking off balance, tremors, and seizures. In severe cases, they may develop damage to the liver or kidneys. We've got all the signs of that. There is no antidote for mothball poisoning. Zip. So it really is supportive care and decontamination. Like if you know that they got into them, so your veterinarian may give, they may or may not want to induce vomiting depending on what kind was eaten. They may give activated charcoal, which helps binds the absorption of those things. And then IV fluids, that sort of thing. And sometimes when you take x-rays, you can actually see the mothballs on x-ray. So, if we were nervous and if Lucy hadn't popped out of what the seizure and everything on Sunday, that would have been the next option. They were in New Jersey, try to find an emergency service in New Jersey. And all I can say is good luck to that, because they've been a problem for years. And maybe we would have seen a mothball sitting down in there. Who knows? They may require blood transfusions if they have an anemia. And the outcome depends on a lot of factors, including initial health, amount ingested, time to treatment. So how do you prevent mothball poisoning? I've got a lot more stuff here. So always store them out of reach of children and pets. The best thing is don't use them. Only store them in closed, airtight containers to prevent accidental ingestion. Make sure you follow label instructions. Never use them loose in your home. Don't throw them in the closet, in your yard, or your garden to repel pests. Do not mix different types of mothballs or mix mothballs with other chemicals or insecticides. Um, and there's a lot of non-chemical ways that we can keep moths and things out of our closets. So let's look for essential oils and other things that are a little less damaging. Okay, so the incidence of mothball poisoning in pets is fairly low. About 75 cases are reported a year. So that's not a lot when you consider, and this is coming from the Pet Poison Control Center. So, and they get all the reports. Let's see. So the naphthalene is going to be the most toxic. That's the old-fashioned ones. And interestingly, cataracts can develop even from exposure to the fumes over time. Thought that was really interesting. And this even with the paradichlorobenzene. So Teresa's parents, I don't know how long they've been dealing with mothballs in their house, but long-term exposure to the fumes can cause kind of a slow, insidious kidney disease, liver disease, neurologic signs, GI signs, and also cataracts. Really, really interesting. And retinal damage. So, the last thing we need in our senior citizens is more trouble seeing. We have enough trouble. And so here's the thing, for those of you who are watching, if you have parents, grandparents who are in, 70s, 80s, 90s, there's a good chance they're still using them and you don't know. So go open the closets, smell, because you will smell them. The fumes are very irritating to the nose, eyes, and lungs. Pets who are around mothball fumes may develop red, runny eyes, a runny nose, sneezing, and or coughing. And birds are even more susceptible. Anything with fumes. And birds can die just from being exposed to the fumes. They don't have to be. They don't have to eat them. So how do you tell what kind of mothball it is if you don't have the packaging and you don't know? I mean, you might be able to smell the difference, but if you don't know and you haven't been around them a lot, here's what you can do. Add 3 to 4 tablespoons of table salt to a half cup of lukewarm water. It's a lot of salt in a half cup of water. Mix thoroughly, add additional salt if necessary until no more salt will dissolve. So you're kind of making seawater. And then put a mothball in that salt solution. Naphthalene mothballs will float. The old-fashioned kind will float, and the paradichlorobenzene mothballs will sink. So that's a way to tell whether you have the really toxic ones or the a little bit less toxic, but still not good. Okay, I thought that was an interesting tidbit. All right, so Joey, I want that colored ball picture. So those are mothballs. How many of you think that looks like candy that your children would be like, "Ooh, baby"? I mean, to me, that looks like those little Mentos. I mean, they smell terrible, but why would a pesticide company make the pesticide look like that? I mean, come on. And Teresa's got a small granddaughter. I've got a small granddaughter. I can just see this looking so appeasing. Thank God they smell bad. They got to taste bad, but people do eat them weirdly. Okay, so here's a case study. This is called This Really Happened. Case 1. A 19-month-old healthy boy swallowed some mothballs containing paradichlorobenzene. The child was brought to the emergency room where he was given activated charcoal. He seemed fine and his physical examination was normal. 3 days later, his family took him back to the emergency room. His skin was yellow and he was fussy. His heart rate was very fast and his hemoglobin was very low. That's the iron carrying part of your red blood cell or oxygen carrying. The mothballs had caused his red blood cells to rupture. He was given a transfusion of packed red blood cells, admitted to the hospital. His hemoglobin level rose, and the child recovered without additional problems. Case 2. A 6-month-old, 20-pound dog swallowed an unknown quantity of naphthalene, the old-fashioned mothballs, that someone had spread all across a lawn. The time of the ingestion was unknown. The veterinarian consulted poison control when the dog was brought in lethargic, anemic, vomiting blood, and bleeding into his abdomen. They discussed the use of methylene blue, which is an antidote that can treat an abnormal form of hemoglobin that cannot carry oxygen properly, which may result from ingestion of naphthalene. Not really an antidote, but it was worth a try. And then doing transfusions and intravenous fluids. The dog, however, was too sick and had to be euthanized. Not cool. Okay. So, mothballs should not be placed in closets, attics, basements, storage chests, or trunks. That's another common place where they are, the blanket chests.
Trunks. Yep.
Yeah. Garment bags, or other spaces other than in tightly closed containers, as explained above. Gases from the mothballs escape into the air and can cause respiratory problems. High levels of the chemical fumes can accumulate in closed areas like the guest room and certainly in the closet. Improper use of mothballs can lead to long-term exposures to people and pets. The fumes are heavier than air and will accumulate along floors, posing a higher danger to small children and pets.
Mhm.
Another misunderstanding is the use of mothballs in outdoor areas to repel rodents, squirrels, bats, snakes, or other wildlife. Mothballs are ineffective for this use and can contaminate soil and water. Using mothballs as animal repellents is not appropriate and can be illegal. And interestingly, we bought essential oil pellets to sprinkle around the perimeter of the barn to keep critters away. I don't do it often enough to make it actually work, and we have a million mice. It's fine. That's why we have a million cats. And mothballs should never be used in schools, daycare centers, and other public buildings. We probably all grew up breathing those fumes. So, acute or short-term exposure of humans to naphthalene by inhalation, ingestion, or skin contact is associated with hemolytic anemia, damage to the liver, and neurologic damage. Cataracts have been reported in workers acutely exposed to naphthalene by inhalation or ingestion. Chronic long-term exposure of workers and rodents to naphthalene has been reported to cause cataracts and damage to the retina. Hemolytic anemia has been reported in infants born to mothers who sniffed and ingested naphthalene as mothballs during pregnancy. Why? Why, oh, why would you want to eat mothballs? I read another study, and maybe it was in that NIH publication that I sent to you, where a woman ate like 25 mothballs on purpose. I don't
Yep.
know if she was trying to kill herself or she was crazy, but she ate a whole bunch and she died.
You
But it
died,
took
yeah.
it took a while. It took like 5 or 7
5 days.
days. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. So this was I had never really thought about it. And I can honestly say that I had mothballs in my homes 35, 40 years ago. And I know my parents use them. I know my grandparents use them. Um, so this was just one of those things. And then I was so shocked that I talked to a lot of younger people who didn't know what mothballs are. So I thought, well, we probably should tell people. But it's kind of a wake up call, even for your parents, grandparents. If you go to their house and you smell them, get rid of them because it's not good for them. It's certainly not good for small children, grandchildren going to visit. It's certainly not good for animals going to visit, or animals that live there, but really not good for the people who are living there as well. So this is one of those air quality issues that we talk about, having clean air that we're breathing. So not using a bunch of chemical sprays and deodorizers, and
Right.
not using inexpensive candles that have, oils and fragrances in them that may not be so good for you to inhale or your animals. So
Yep. Yep.
anyway,
Yep. My parents promised me no more. Not even the less poisonous kind. No more.
good.
They're done. So
Yay.
yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed. We'll see what happens next time you go to visit, because I know you're going to go in and do the sniff test.
And the looking. I'm gonna go on the scavenger hunt too. So
We'll have to go on a scavenger hunt. But, well, thank you very much for sharing Lucy's story. We are all praying and hoping that little Lucy has an incredible recovery back to 100% normal health, because she's just
thank
a
you.
youngster, right?
She's 4. She's 4
Yeah.
years old. Yeah.
She's a youngster. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we'll get this. The good news is she has 5 lung lobes. This is only really affecting one.
Good.
So we'll hope we get
Yeah.
it cleared up, and she's back to normal. So
Yeah.
all right, everybody, spread the word. This is one of those things that we don't talk about, and it never would have dawned on me to talk about it until this. So
Mm-hmm.
check your house, check your grandparents' house. If you buy an old house, I just saw something the other day where family members had died, and people went into the house and they were trying to clean it out to get it ready for resale, and they found 1 million pennies in bags in the basement, crawl space, whatever, and they were so heavy, it took them weeks of backbreaking work to get these bags of pennies out of there, and nobody will take them because, what bank wants a million pennies? They're estimating it's a million based on the weight of them. But they could actually be very valuable because they're copper pennies. They're not the newer zinc pennies because they've been down in that basement for so long. So you never know what you're going to find when you go on a search.
Don't bring your dogs on a search
Don't
or
bring your dogs.
your any of your pets. Don't do that.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you're going to find.
Yeah.
All right, Joey, I think we're good. Teresa, thanks. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. You're welcome.